Criminally underrated.
What city is this? Are you in London?
Brighton. Do you know where it is?
Brighton? No.
It's South England, but on the coast.
I've been to England twice, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, two times. And I went
London.
to London both times. I went to what's that place? Brick Road? Is that a place?
Brick Lane. Is that right?
Brick Lane, yeah.
Yeah.
And got fish and chips, and I was like, this is okay.
Fish and chips. Yeah. No.
I'm just saying that's my memory of being there.
Yeah.
Is that I got these fish and chips? Yeah.
Like, I don't know if do you get fish and chips in Canada?
Oh yeah, of course. You know what? Most of the cultural food from the United Kingdom we have in Canada because we're a colony. So a lot of that stuff we've got.
Yeah. I was gonna say, yeah. Like, yeah. I mean, if you're gonna have fish and chips, Brighton's actually really, really good for that, actually, because we're right by the sea and we get all our fish imported, like directly.
So not imported, you get it local.
Yeah. So it's like fresh, like really fresh.
Dude, see, this is what I'm talking about. I really, really love that kind of stuff quite a bit.
So yeah, to start off with, I mean, one of the things that really attracted me to your work is how you actually really make the audience think about the reality and fiction. In a sense, like, even like now I've watched quite a lot of your work, like I still don't know what is faked, what is real, you know. I mean, what drew you to that style? What kind of made you want to have that kind of complicated way of creating?
Yeah, for me, it was like that's, I think, what it's certainly me, but my friends also really enjoy, I think, about movie making generally. The idea of not knowing the truth about something. And when I was a kid, I was obsessed with that idea. Like I loved lying to people, especially when they knew what the truth was. When I was like I got obsessed with this when I was quite young, and I would always get from my own family. I've talked about this before, but for some reason there was a habit in my family of asking questions that you already knew the answer to, but quite seriously and not as a joke. It was just sort of, it just would happen. And I, in whatever kind of rebellious way, would then give answers that I knew the person knew weren't the truth, but trying to make it seem as though I was telling the truth and putting the person who asked this question in a very difficult position, because they'd ask me a question knowing what the answer was. And I've told them an answer that wasn't the answer that they knew, but what are they going to do? Say that I know that that's not the answer, but then why did you ask the question? Like that just sort of became a habit of mine, quite a destructive habit, really.
I was gonna say it's quite manipulative in a way, but
of being asked. Well, you know what? It was manipulative on both sides, in my opinion, because I've come to realize later that when people, especially children, when children ask you questions that they already know the answer to, really they're looking to have their worldview reaffirmed. Like they're almost looking to just sort of pleasantly speak with you or to connect with you. Oftentimes they'll ask you questions that they think you'll like. But you know, when I'm 6 years old, I didn't have the psychological capacity to understand that whatsoever. So I would just be like, "Why are you asking me this? It's so annoying." And so I would just lie, and then it turned into a crazy habit. And then, not to draw a direct connection, but then in filmmaking, I thought that was such a cool thing to show an audience something that they knew 100% couldn't be true. Like there's no way it could be true. And yet they're asking themselves, but wait, is this actually true? And that's such an amazing feeling that you can only really get with television and film. Like it's difficult to get, like you can't get that in music, right? You can't really get that. I guess it like painters experimented with that stuff. Like, I guess it's sort of like Duchampian in a way, where it's like, well, what is this really? Like showing art and being like this is a representation of art, not actually art. But it's not quite the same as watching, say, a YouTube video of somebody, like being attacked by a killer whale, but then being like, wait a minute, was that really somebody being attacked by a killer whale, or was I just fooled into enjoying it? Which is another crazy thing I love, which is like, well, what does it matter? Like, yes, you were fooled, but you were fooled into what? Into believing some story actually happened? The stakes are quite low in the films and the television show that we made, because to believe it, like to believe that it's real, doesn't mean that you're going to change the way that you live your life. It just means that you believe that something like crazy and magical is possible, as opposed to cynically thinking that it's just a creation.
Yeah, I mean, like there's no such thing as evidence, like in my eyes, like, because evidence can be like anything, like that scene in Operation Avalanche where you're talking about Sputnik with the sound of Sputnik. And you're saying like you recognize that sound because it's the same sound as Sputnik.
Yes, but it's just a signal. Yeah, it's exactly just a signal, or it's a symbol of what the thing actually is, which is what people seem to deal with so much these days. It's like there's these key little markers that tell people something is real, or that something is believable, or something actually happened. And then as soon as filmmakers learned what these markers were, especially in like the documentary world, or the quote unquote found footage style of filmmaking, it became like a really crazy Wild West in terms of filmmaking, because you could start using the markers of realism to create a completely fake story. But if you were really, really good at following the rules of the way documentaries or found footage actually looked, then you could do really amazing stuff. Like you could really fool people, or I shouldn't say fool people, but give people that kind of like weightless feeling of, oh my God, I can't believe I'm watching this, because I'm keeping both thoughts in my head at the same time. This is completely fake, but it's also completely real. It's like Schrodinger's film or reality.
Yeah. Did you ever pitch like one of your films to, let's say, a random person as like a natural documentary, just as a test?
How do you mean? Like I would tell somebody that what they just watched was real after they'd seen it?
For example, the Dirties. If you showed that to someone and gave them no context at all about it being like scripted or a fake documentary. Have you ever like tested that in front of somebody to see if they think it's real or not?
It happens naturally. Like people, I remember when I was at the Sarasota Film Festival with the Dirties, it's a geriatric crowd exclusively. Like the people at that film festival, I'm not sure what it's like now, but it was like a retirement home film festival. And after the screening, I went up to do the Q&A, and the crowd was like truly mortified. Like they were, like there was a real sense of horror that I was there, because enough of them had believed that what they had just watched was real. Now, that is, like, I would almost say that's cruelly making fun of the naivety of old film audiences who are going to believe everything that they see. I don't think that any like contemporary generation watching anything is going to believe that it's real. Although I've been surprised, like people will come up to me and ask if certain things were real that I think are absurd. Like there's an episode of Nirvana, the band, the show, where we rob a bank, and I'm often asked if that was real. But I mean, it's funny because that just goes to show that like there's so many different levels of watching this kind of stuff. And obviously we try to make it so that it seems like at least at some level what's happening is actually occurring, but it's you never know what people will believe. But to answer your question literally, no, I would never say that like what you are about to watch or this is completely and totally real. Maybe like little moments inside of the show or a film, I'd be like that was totally real, or I'd bend the truth around that just to see if people would be able to see through it, but never on the whole.
Yeah, I mean, like, for example, that bank robbery episode. I mean, for when I was watching that, it was probably the most convincing episode I'd seen up until the point where you like grabbed one of the robbers
and shot him.
Shot
yeah,
him.
shot him
Like,
in the
that,
head. Yeah,
that was the point where I was like, okay, no, this is definitely like fate.
yeah, right.
Because your like reaction to like the bank robbers coming into the bank was very real to me. Like it seemed genuine.
Hey, well, that's a huge compliment because the few times that I've watched that moment of Jay and I reacting to the bank robbers, I'm like, oh, we suck. God, this is so bad. But we that was a very hard episode to make in that sense. And in fact, right up until we released it, there was some debate within our team as to whether or not we should have Matt and Jay wake up at the end of the episode as though it were all a dream, so that we could somehow get away from just how ridiculous it all was. But you know what? In the end, I actually think that in that world, like for those characters, it actually feels relatively grounded, and that they behave as though this is just another day for them.
Yeah, because they are like psychopaths at the end of the day. Like they are like,
well, they're
messed up.
Yeah, well, they're detached from consequences of their actions outside of how it affects them, in the way that children kind of are like, well, look, I want to go to the store and get candy, so whatever, like whatever else is happening around that bubble is sort of immaterial to me. I really need to get this candy.
Yeah, because I think he described the show as once about two guys who are stuck in the 90s.
Yeah.
Which I get completely, because the whole, like, you know, GoldenEye thing, you know, they're obsessed with playing GoldenEye.
And also emotionally, we're sort of trying to play the people that we were in like 1996, 1997, like when we were sort of around that age. And it's not too far off from when Jay and I actually first met. So there is the arrested development of that moment is actually really important.
I want to talk about like how so what were you kind of originally like a guerrilla filmmaker, like someone who was a fly on the wall kind of guy, or did you kind of force yourself to become that?
Well, in film school, I was making things that were like very standard and not at all in the same style as Nirvana, the band, the show, which was the first thing I made out of film school. But it still had lots of like illegal shooting in public, shooting without permission. But it's funny, that comes from a kind of like lack of preparation more than it comes from a philosophical, artistic place, right? It's not like I was like, oh, it has to be shot in the public square because of some meaning. It was just like, that's where the locations were and that's where the people were. But then when we started shooting Nirvana, the band, it became clear quickly that this was something that we could do with wireless microphones, that for some reason big productions or older filmmakers just were not doing. And I had no idea why. Like none. And even to this day, I remember back when I was a kid, I would say, oh yeah, so many people are going to start doing this because it's so easy. And because the results are so interesting. Like when you shoot with real people, like it's crazy what happens. Like, and I mean that, like you can't, like money can't buy what will happen. And yet somehow it just truly hasn't caught on in the way that I really thought that it would, because it's free. Like it doesn't cost any money. It's in some ways easier, and it leads to really, really interesting story moments. But it seems though the only people who are willing to like shoot in public are like kind of pranksters, or like variations on Tom Green or Ali G, or like that kind of like you can almost say public sketch comedy in a way. Nobody's, well, I shouldn't say nobody, because people have done it, but it not in the way that I think they should be, because shooting in public is really, it's like magic. It's crazy.
Well, I mean, when you are working with actual like real people, like the public, do you ever like panic in situations like that, or are you just like very good at kind of improv?
What, you know what's funny? So long as you are being who you are, then that's like saying, like, would you panic if you were talking to somebody on the street?
Yeah.
Like you know, like you're going to buy fish and chips, like in Brighton, and they say, hey, do you want, like, it's going to be $8, and you thought it was going to be $9. Like, are you panicking? Like, no. Like, we'd panic if there was something The highest stakes it gets for us is when we need an intended result to happen. So we need a random person in the public to say specifically something to us because we know that's going to be the turn into the next act. And so then we can get really, really close to something. And if we don't get it, or if it seems like this person is catching on, or if they're noticing the cameras, then maybe there's a kind of panic, but it's more of a regret. Really, what's panic inducing is more happening with Jared, the cinematographer, and whoever's shooting the show at that moment. Like, that's where the panic happens, because you don't know when you're going to get something amazing. And so it's like being at war, right? Like they're shooting something and it's like nonsense, maybe for hours, like unusable garbage. But then all of a sudden somebody will say something so perfect. And then as soon as it's done, there's like, okay, did we get it? And that's not, it's almost like an unfair question. It's like, were you perfectly and completely ready to get that shot? Were you in the exact right place? Like that's where I think that's the panic is felt much more on the side of the camera team than on Jay and my side.
I mean, how do you deal with like the narrative focus? I mean, when something's going with the story, do you kind of just go with the flow or try and get back onto its original tracks?
Well, you know, if the great thing is if somebody is talking with us and they're being themselves, then that like we'll follow it to wherever it goes. And Jay and I, because there's two of us normally, are able to between ourselves get the story back to where it's supposed to be. Because typically the story in Nirvana the band is about the psychological dynamic between us, between what one of us wants versus what the other one wants in serving the macro mission, which is, you know, get a show at the Rivoli or whatever it is in that moment. And so normally we can twist or bend whatever somebody's saying to us into either a check or an X on our respective columns of, yes, see, this is what I wanted to hear. And so, and because the characters are so stupid, they can misinterpret what anybody says to them as either a positive or a negative statement on their current path towards a goal, right? So, and because people, especially in Canada, are so insanely polite, they won't like correct you when you say, I see, okay, so what you mean is, you know, we have to go to Sears to get our picture taken. And they'll be like, yes, because they just don't, like, nobody wants to say no, which is, you know, actually a testament to how nice it is to live here. The people are so willing to help, so long as you are being genuine with them, which these characters are. Like, they're completely and totally genuine with everybody.
Yeah, that's one thing about Toronto, actually, about like why you shoot there, is that like because you get them kind of reactions from the crowd, like, or could you see the shows set anywhere else?
We shoot here because we live here. We'd never tried shooting anywhere else. So I mean, when we first started, we weren't thinking like, oh, we're going to make a Toronto show because Toronto has these unique properties. It just wound up being that way. I think it's sort of like a Darwinian reality that the show wound up catching on and doing well because the state of affairs in Toronto worked out for it. If we had been shooting this show in a different city, I don't know. I have no idea. We've talked about doing, well, hey, look, like we shot an episode of the show at the Sundance Film Festival, and that's like a basically a completely different world. But I would argue that is not necessarily reality, because everybody there is trying to play so nice with one another, and the mood is so festive. It has kind of a Christmas attitude to it. So everybody there, I would say, was just as polite and nice. Also, they're mostly Mormons there too. That's true.
Can I talk about the episode actually, about how like how far were you able to convince, like how much communication did you have with the festival, or was it very much, you know, you didn't contact the festival and you kind of just went along to it and filmed that way?
We had no contact with the festival at all, and I think for good reason, because it's the type of thing where actually, I'll say it's not for the reason you'd think. Oftentimes, I think people think about getting permission from a person or a location or an institution because they feel like they're going to need it to proceed. Right. So in this, we'll take the Sundance episode. We were like, oh, we need to tell the festival we're going to shoot this episode of our show and explain the episode to them and see if they're okay with it. So there's the base layer of which I'm sure everybody's thinking, which is, well, what if they say no? Then we're fucked. Then we can't do it. Then all of a sudden we're breaking the rules if we do it. And that's completely true and valid. And filmmakers should think about that. But at another level, by letting people know what it is that you're doing, or by bringing them into it, you actually rob them of their ability to be themselves in a pretty serious way. And so when we were talking with interviewers, or when I was being interviewed about Operation Avalanche, if I were to say to the people interviewing me, okay, now can we pretend that I snuck this small, stupid movie into this festival and you are treating me as though I am like an upstart filmmaker who has broken in to this place? Immediately, and they all said yes. Let's say they said yes. Okay. The way that they would talk to me and the way that they would behave would be as untrained, like actors trying to be funny, and we wouldn't be able to use any of it. The same goes with people in the public, with people at the film festival who we talk to. It completely changes everything and puts it in the world of the way that like a piece of shit television show would do that. Like you're a total hack when you're getting like strangers to act for you and you're using it as though it's so funny that these strangers are behaving like, whoa, wow, this is all a big joke. There's nothing for me. There's nothing more painful than watching people try to be funny when it's no fault of their own. It's not like, oh, this person isn't funny, why are they trying to be? It's almost like they were co-opted into this thing where it's like, okay, I'm on a TV show, I guess I have to be funny. Like, it's truly cruel actually to do that. Whereas really everybody's amazing at playing themselves. Everybody's so good at it. Like we do it all the time. We're ourselves 24 hours a day, except for the times when we're told to act or when we have to put on a face for something because we think people are going to be watching us. Like there's a screen there, right? So I mean, we try to always, and the same with the Dirties, the same with Operation Avalanche when we were at NASA. Like this philosophy goes through to all of it. That like let people be themselves, let people show their real selves, because most of the time, unless you're trying to really be cruel and make fun of these people, which I think you should never be doing. Like, well, I shouldn't never say never, but like that's if your intention is to belittle people and like show their ugly reality and like expose them, I that's a different kind of filmmaking. Yeah. Maybe there's a place for that, but I'm not interested in that. What we want to do is actually show people and how like there's something amazing about watching like an authentic real person react to a bizarre situation that's not threatening. Like you get crazy reactions. I remember from that episode when Jay's playing the piano for those two women and they're asking him if he knows any Billy Joel. And we shot that for like an hour. They sat there just listening to Jay play the piano, had no idea they were on camera. It's like, and they're so real. And then Jay, of course, brilliantly is saying, I got to call him. I got to call my friend Matt. Yeah, I got to leave. Like they have no idea what he's talking about. And they're acting like, what? I thought we were listening to Billy Joel. And those women, let me put it to you this way. There's been almost 0 times in all of the things we've ever shot and released, everything, every episode of the show, every movie we've made, where somebody found out they were in it and was upset with how they came off.
Really?
Was upset with the way that they looked, with the way that they sounded, was feeling like they were manipulated. Now, some people have had like problems with the fact that we set up a crazy situation around them and they didn't want to be a part of it. But the things that are in the show, it is the rarest of times that somebody's like, that they're feeling like they came off as anything other than themselves, which I think is cool. And in fact, it's the thing that Jay and I are trying to do as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, how do you deal with like release forms and getting the public's like permission to because I mean, obviously you can't get everyone's permission, but those people who are kind of like, I don't want to be on this, or kind of like, no, I feel a bit funny being filmed. Like,
we have a good philosophy on that, which is that we have like the most amazing field producer named Matt Grayson, who is just a wonderful person, and he talks with everybody that we have on camera. He'll go up and explain to them sort of what had just gone on, and if people are really upset about what just happened, or if they feel like they're really not happy, then I'm trying to think of a time when we've used something when somebody's been upset. I think it's never happened. In fact, I know it's never happened because I always get told, like, especially if we got something really, really amazing, that this person wasn't happy or whatever. And then we'll talk with them. We'll show them the footage. We'll say, this is what it's like. This is our intention. Because I think a lot of times, because prank shows have become so ubiquitous and people sort of know, oh, I got caught on camera doing something. What did I say? What did I do? I think they have a fear that they're going to be portrayed as just a complete fool or something like that. And so oftentimes just showing them what it actually is will make them go, oh, I see. Like the perception was not right. But to further answer your question, when we're shooting in public, like completely in public, you don't actually need release forms from people that you talk to, provided that they don't do anything to really humiliate themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess like anyone wouldn't really mind being on camera unless like they're
you never know,
a criminal
or they're having an affair or something like that. Like you never know. Like people could have all kinds of reasons. Some people may just not want to be on TV.
Yeah, I mean that thing as well with like prank shows as well. Most prank shows that I've seen are mainly the host humiliating the audience.
I know, it's ridiculous.
There's rarely any like innocent ones or kind of like really nice ones.
Well, yeah. Jay and I are always trying to make it so that he and I are kind of the joke, or like we're the like we're the stupid ones. Do you know what I mean? Like we have there's no winking at the audience over, oh man, can you believe these people think that we really want to show at the Rivoli? What a bunch of idiots. Like it's quite the opposite. I guess it sort of is in line with its Canadianness in a way.
So I noticed something as well because I was rewatching a lot of your stuff recently. I noticed how the Dirties and Operation Avalanche, like in Operation Avalanche, you use your real names, Matt Johnson and Owen Wilson. Williams. Sorry.
Yeah.
Is like there like a connected universe between the Dirties and Operation Avalanche? Because I get quite a Edgar Wright kind of feel, like with the whole Cornetto trilogy, like how these characters kind of act the same in both films.
You're right. Well, originally when we first finished the Dirties, we'd intended on, it was Matt Miller, the producer, and I, we were flying home from the first film festival it screened at, talking about what the next movie we should make is. And we wanted to make a sequel that was the exact same characters, but in a completely new situation, because I'd never seen anything like that before. I mean, it's a great reference that it's very similar to what Edgar Wright is doing with those two guys, and shot in the same style and put in more or less the same situation, but in a different time. And so, yes, they're connect. Well, I mean, obviously, they're literally connected through these characters, but we have a third movie that we're thinking about making that sort of ties those. I shouldn't say ties them together. But we have a third movie that is in the same style that we've been talking about doing.
Yeah, I mean, I've read up a little bit about this film I think you're talking about. Can you talk about it at all, or is that?
You know what? You'd surprised me. I don't know what movie you're talking about. Let's see if we're talking about the same film.
Let me get us. It was a screenshot from an interview I saw about, you described it as it's about H.P. Lovecraft's father being taken by a
that's
Quebec
it.
cult.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah. So that is the movie. Yeah, I'm amazed I talked about that. But yeah, it's like the origin. It's the origin story at once of the country of Canada, like how the the Confederacy Papers were signed, like how Canada became a country in 1867,
Right.
and also the origin story of all of H.P. Lovecraft's fiction. Like they happened at the exact same time.
Yeah, I
but
mean,
yes,
like,
that's our plan.
I mean, from what I've read, it's going to be shot in the same style as Operation Avalanche, which makes it more insane for me.
Yeah, it was an idea that with cinematographer from Operation Avalanche, Andy Appel, had, which was to make a fake documentary about pirates and like the 1600s, and like do a found footage movie about piracy at the high seas and just how crazy and amazing it would be. And we had like talked before, Miller and I, about this film Monk about the artist. And this is like a documentary made about an artist well before there were film cameras. This movie's amazing. If you haven't seen it, it's quite boring, but there's amazing things to it. And that was a big influence on Avalanche. And then when Andy was talking about making a movie about a time when there were no cameras, and just like going with it, like there's just something so funny about that.
Yeah,
so funny about that. But yes, yeah, that is the film.
Yeah, I mean, like, essentially there'll be some kind of surrealness to it, surely, like, as well as being like.
Well, hopefully not. Surreal in the sense that there's lots of like phantasmagorical, like demonology, like like a lot of Lovecraft stuff is in it, and there's lots of like cultishness. It's very similar to the Grant Morrison comic The Invisibles. I don't know if you've ever seen that book, but he's a fellow Brit, or maybe he's Scottish actually. Maybe he wouldn't like that. But it is it's fantastical in that way, but still the filmmaking is extremely grounded, and hopefully audiences watching it will be like, the last thing that they're thinking about is how are they filming this. Like it will just be sort of a part of the fun of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great shows where you forgot it's been filmed. Like I mean, you mentioned Ali G, like the Ali G show. Like, are there any other like British shows which have kind of influenced your work?
You know, I'll say Chris Lilly is probably the biggest influence on me personally, other than people like, I mean, obviously Tom Green is a big influence, even though, you know, I would say our taste is pretty far apart, but like he was a bellwether for this type of filmmaking. And then I don't know if you've watched any Chris Lilly stuff, but specifically the pilot to Summer Heights High was a major influence. Big time. He's not British, he's Australian, but you know what? Pretty close to us people over here in the new world. And then Ricky Gervais was a big influence, but these are like obvious, like almost like hacky influences in a way, but they were, and like The Office originally sort of set a lot of the language for how you would do something like this, and basically playing with the context of how something is being shot. But in terms of shooting with real people, like outside and being like, whoa, how are they doing this? That Orson Welles film F for Fake is something that had a major influence on me when I was young. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's a movie where he basically, it's almost like a film essay where he basically talks about the nature of faking and forgeries, and he interviews he interviews a guy who is the most famous art forger, and a lot of that plays with the same kind of things that would later go on to be like major elements of the films and the show that we made, just because like he was so interested in it, I was so interested in it, that it was. You should watch that documentary if you've never seen it. I would say it's extremely compelling, and it has held up very, very well. But other contemporary influences, it's hard because not a lot of people are shooting in the real world, especially as innocently as we are.
I mean,
but you know what? I'm sure they're out there. Oh! There is a there is a filmmaker who lives in New York right now named Kaveh Zahidi, who is like a real genius, and quite crazy. But he has been making movies, like I want to say since the 80s, that are shot in a very similar style. And I really I think I saw one of his films when I was in film school and kind of disregarded it. But then later was shown by Jared Rabb, our cinematographer, a television show that he made called The Show About the Show, that you should definitely check out if you like Nirvana the band, The Show. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's like it's like a more, actually I can't even really totally describe it, but imagine a guy making a movie or making a TV show about himself, where he gets all the people in the show to play themselves, and when people refuse to read the lines that he's written for them or refuse to play themselves, he gets actors to play them, and everybody else is real. And he recreates reality over and over and over and over and over again, much to the chagrin of everybody in his life. Like his wife hates him, his coworkers hate him, and people are afraid to talk with him in real life because they don't want that interaction to become the next episode of the show. And he's relentless. He's just going and going. Did you ever see the film Waking Life?
No.
The Linklater movie. He has a cameo in that where he basically discusses this. It's a Bressonian quote or technique. It's something about. It's called the holy moment. About anything you put on film is the will of God. Like anything, no matter what you film, it's God manifest. Which, I mean, I think that dies in this modern era of everybody filming everything. But he believes in this deeply.
I was gonna say that the show about the show thing, was that kind of like anyone is in on the project, or was it entirely written?
It's very bizarre. So he will write what he remembers as having happened, and he'll make everybody say these things. And people could be like, I didn't say that, I said this, and they'll sort of change their dialogue. But the show is half documentary, half recreation of these things.
Right.
So it's all like it's a whirlwind. And I would say if you're into any type of self-reflexive filmmaking, like this is like, I won't say it's the ultimate. The ultimate is that New York film, Symbiopsychotaxoplasm. And if you've never seen that, it's a Criterion film. Crazy. Luca, my friend, showed me that. He was the other cinematographer on Nirvana the band. Symbiopsychotaxoplasm. Check it out if you haven't seen it. Insane.
I mean, the weird thing is I've never heard of any of these films, so they must be like quite hard to, or very obscure.
Well, they're art filmmakers, but you know what? Like once you're in that world, it's like all this. It's all just funny. Like you don't. The worst thing you can do is watch this stuff pretentiously and be like, oh yeah, wow, it's so deep. What you need to be doing is watching this stuff and being like, yeah, these people are crazy. These filmmakers are crazy. I can't believe they're doing this, and I can't believe this is real. Yeah,
I think that a lot about that with like David Lynch. Like, did you watch?
It's a great example.
Yeah.
Wow, a lot, but like I've seen the hits.
But
of course. Look.
A lot of people like take him seriously. A lot of people are like genuinely interpreting what he's trying to say. But
you like David Foster Wallace, yeah.
He's a
dude. I agree completely.
Absolutely.
The same with PTA. The same with a lot of these filmmakers that are considered to be like kind of titans of like art house cinema. Like you rob yourself of so much joy if you're not watching their work and laughing at not only the construction of it, but what's actually going on in the frame. Like these people are, I mean, I can't speak for any of them really, but there's so much more joy in watching films and television unpretentiously and connecting with the humans in it, as opposed to trying to keep in the back of your mind all the time, now wait a minute, what does this really mean? Because then you're kind of living in a world of like pure symbols and guessing, and you literally like sap the humanity from anything that you watch.
Yeah, I mean, even a great example from like Lynch as well is he. I don't know if you've seen his YouTube channel. He started doing like weather reports, but these weather reports are just from his bedroom, and it's just the most basic kind of weather reporting ever. It's the most insane thing ever. He's just like in a chair looking out of his window being like, oh, the sky is very grey today, so there could be rain chance. It's just insane. Whoever thinks
I had no idea he was doing this.
But it's clear evidence that he's a comedian because it's so ridiculous. All of this stuff.
Well, he's always been funny. Dude, like Mel Brooks produced The Elephant Man.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, Mel Brooks is a good one for like kind of bending like comedy and drama. Like, you know, what's funny, what isn't funny.
And also trying to show things that are like they basically play with the context of what is real and what isn't real. I just finished watching the OJ Made in America documentary, and the Zucker brothers were in it a lot. At least I think. Either way, they were showing footage from the original Naked Gun when OJ just gets filled with bullets, and yet the thing that's really bothering him isn't that he's been, you know, shot 500 times by machine guns. It's that, you know, he leaned up against some white paint and that he accidentally stubbed his toe, and all these things are the things that are really bothering him. If you haven't seen this clip, you should. It's incredible. It's so funny. It's OJ at his absolute very best. I don't want we shouldn't start talking about OJ. I've got a lot to say there. But but you're not, or you are?
I know I'm a big fan of like the topic of OJ, let's say.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Me and Jay as well. In fact, we used to talk about him all the time on set when we were kids, because Jay had just read If I Did It and was quoting it all the time. And I think some of the stuff made it into the show. Jay sung an OJ song. Like, OJ is just one of those, again, like peak 90s. Lorena Bobbitt, OJ, Tanya Harding, like these things for us, Columbine, the icons of those were so powerful that we can sit and unpack the mythology of them forever. Like, I could talk about those things forever, and I don't even know anything about them. And yet somehow, because I was so young when these things were happening, and I only heard, you know, what the parents will tell you about them, they loom so large in my subconscious mind.
There's something interesting about, you mentioned Columbine. Like, how old were you when that happened?
I was in grade 8, I think.
Right. So,
maybe.
So yeah.
Like, I was a kid.
Actually in school, like what
maybe
was
grade 7. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was your kind of reaction to it? Like, were you like bothered or kind of like scared?
No, I wasn't bothered at all. No, not scared even a bit. Look, like when you're that young, actually I can't, what am I going to speak for every child on earth? No, like my group of friends were so cynical and so into ourselves and so navel gazing that something like that was just like, whoa, crazy world news. Same with 9/11, the same with like any because when you're that young, your universe is this big, you know. It's like your family, your friends, your teachers, like those people, like they represent like your gods in a way. Like that's your entire reality. And so when you hear about things like that, I know for me it was just me hearing about these kids who'd done this shooting and then trying to incorporate that into my own tiny worldview, and like, okay, so who are the school shooters that I know? Like, what does that mean here? It just like the story elements just, it was in no way. I mean, Princess Diana, here's a great example. I was a kid and Princess Diana had just been, she just died in the tunnel. And I was in music class and Mr. Dobson was so, this is Matt Miller behind me.
No, hi.
He's the producer of everything we do. And hey, Miller? Or you don't want to stay?
Well, you're in the middle of the thing.
I'm telling the story of when Princess Di died.
And I can't hear it.
Oh, shit. Oh,
I was at a party.
Yeah, right. You're at a party when she died?
Yeah.
I was in, yeah, I guess, no, I would have just been at home, but I found out about it the next day in music class. And I was like, what the hell do people care? It's funny. Like some random lady, but you know, I was just a little kid. I think I was like grade 6 or grade 5. And this girl in my class was crying. And I was like, what the fuck? why are you crying? Did you know, like, who the hell is Princess Di? Like, she's just some random celebrity who died. And yeah, it's, well, oh yeah, that's right. Elton played Candle in the Wind afterwards. Yeah. Well, anyway, look, that's probably a testament to my own like detachment from emotional reality in a way.
I mean,
because a lot of these things happen. Columbine, I had a similar reaction where it was more like TV. Let me put it that way. To me, it was all just TV.
I mean, it's interesting, like you think about it that way, because I have quite similar thought processes with one of my friends. Like, for example, like we went on a plane like quite recently, and we're both like quite terrified of like flying. And the way we kind of overcome that fear is making jokes about like 9/11.
Or like a terrorist exploding the plane or whatever.
Because that kind of like puts that anxiety at ease. It's almost like if we think about it in a jokey way, we know it's never going to happen.
Yeah, right. You take it to the most terrible place possible. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's just a tenet of good friends. That Zizek has got a great quote about that, where he says, like, you can only really be close with somebody if you're willing to take your joking with one another right to the edge, and basically like truly get into dangerous territory with somebody in a joking way. Like, that's how you really create closeness between two people, even strangers.
Yeah, I mean, because it's letting out your kind of your darkest kind of thoughts, I guess, like what's really deep inside you,
and you get to expose yourself. Right? Like, exactly. You truly, because it's what's so hard, I think, about especially like creating modern close friendships or close relationships, is that there is a kind of inbuilt fear of really being exposed and vulnerable, even in comedy, to people. And it's even crazier because now it's almost like, what are you willing to show people that you will even laugh at? Like, even that can be seen as like a dangerous territory for you to go into. And Jay and I talk about this all the time, that like so much of us actually creating the show and shooting the show with one another is being on camera and trying to put one another in the most painfully awkward place possible, is to say all the things about one another that we really know, like the ugliest truths, like the truly painful things. A good example of this is when we're making that episode based on Mrs. Doubtfire, and I come downstairs saying I've got this great plan, but Jay's going to a party and he's not going to invite me, and I have to pretend as though I'm totally fine with it, but really I'm so crushed. And that, like, we didn't have much of a plan for that episode. Like, we knew Jay was going to go to a party, but we didn't really talk about like the psychological dimension of it, and how it was going to really open up, like just how like Matt's ego is going to be so two-sided, where at once he's going to be like, of course I don't need to go to the party. Why would I need to go? It's so stupid. Go to this party if you want. I don't want to go. But at once also reaching out and begging his friend to please include him, or please just don't go. Like, don't have a life without me. Right? Like that in many ways, that's what these two characters are kind of saying to one another. It's almost like the Faustian deal that they make, right? Like, here's the deal. Let's not have a life without one another. And that's going to severely retard us, right? Like our progress as humans is going to basically stop at like 14 years old. But we'll always have fun. We'll always have each other, and we'll always have something to do. So go ahead.
Like with that, similar to what you're talking about with the episode where you go to the Chinese restaurant and it's Canada Day.
Yeah, right.
It's like at the end of the episode, I get two emotions. One's like really like heartwarming and lovely. The second emotion's like really, whoa, this guy's actually really manipulative. Like,
kidnapping, right? Like, it's a kind of
It's like and torture.
Yeah, but I believe that there is an emotional truth to that. And I think that that's one of the reasons why that episode seems to have resonated with people, because I believe that friendships do have an element of capture to them, where nobody's ego is so bulletproof that they could deal with being like, oh yeah, in fact, it would almost be psychotic to say, oh yeah, I can lose my friends. Like if my friend decides he doesn't want to be in the band with me anymore, that's okay. Like if you really love this person, then you're gonna be like, okay, I'll do anything to try to keep this person as my friend. One, because I mean, in this situation, like Matt stupidly really does believe that that's what's best for Jay, but also I think at a deeper level, he knows that without Jay, he completely unravels and basically falls apart.
Yeah,
like they're both of their sense of reality comes from the other one. And if you were when you separate them, ironically, that's what happens in season 3, the as yet unseen season 3, is you see what happens when these two people are apart. And it explores that idea of what actually happens when these two are not with one another.
Well, it's like similar with like when Jay's like by himself, like when he's, I think the 420 episode, where he's like kind of like stumbling around like completely helpless without Matt.
Yeah, and Matt is not too different. Like going on an ego-driven shopping spree, and sort of getting nothing done. Yeah.
It's almost like they're like, if you split them up into two, it's just like half a person in a way.
Yeah, well, it's like any relationship.
It's really sweet, but also quite worrying.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's a great like show about friendship, let's say. New season. Can you talk about it much, or?
Well, I mean, I can say the things that everybody already seems to know, which is that we shot 90% of it before Vice got taken off the air in Canada. And then we were just sort of left homeless, but more like legally homeless, because we couldn't just take what we'd shot and release it on our own. All of it had to happen through Vice.
Yeah, I was going to say, like I saw, I'm not sure how long ago that this was released, but it was like or if it was even real, an episode or like a skit from Nirvana the band show with Eric Andre in place of you.
Right. Yes, exactly. That's a part of season 3.
Oh, okay. Right. I thought it might just have been a little skit or something. But
no. You know what? We haven't shot. Well, maybe we're not above shooting a skit, but Jay and Eric went to music school together in Boston. And they've remained friends. And so when he was in Toronto shooting something, he came by and shot a bunch of stuff with us for season 3. How exactly like that is going to be in the show? Well, you know what? I won't say anything.
Yeah, of course.
We shot. Well, I'll say that season 3 was like wall-to-wall cameos. For whatever reason, I don't even know how it worked out this way, but it was like wall-to-wall cameos because people who we knew were just all in the city at around the same time. So we do one episode at Comic-Con, which people had posted a bunch of photographs of me dressed as Professor Xavier with the Jim Lee floating chair. And that episode has like really like amazing cameos from people who we knew and who were in town because of Comic-Con. But again, it won't be released until we sort of have all this figured out.
Yeah, I was gonna say with the legal stuff, what's the biggest legal threat you've had against?
We've only had one, and it was when we stole that map out of that museum in season 2, in that episode where we're looking for an underground map. That was the most. I shouldn't even say the most. That was the only time when we ever like got into trouble where we had to do something about it. All the other things were like a conversation here or there, and people were completely fine because for the most part it's so innocent. And even what we did at that museum was also extremely innocent. But it so quickly got blown out of proportion, and it led to a massive delay in the airing of season 2. Like I think the time between episode 6, which was the episode before that, and then that episode 7 was like 5 months, maybe even 6 months, the delay between those two things.
Wow.
It was one of those things where we just refused to say no. We were like, we don't care. we're releasing this. We were so proud of it. We were like, this is one of the best things we've ever shot. And we just kept fighting. And in fact, if we had just been like, okay, we give up, like we won't use the footage, then a part of me thinks that season 3 of the show would have been like, would have been done completely in time, like would have been out and released already. Like that delay of 6 months put everything so far behind that Vice as a studio was dissolved by the time we were gearing up to start releasing season 3 episodes. But I wouldn't change a thing. Like I wouldn't feel right about all the work that had gone into that episode, especially all like everything that people had done to make that what it was. If we'd just been like, yeah, okay, we won't release it because you're upset about it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that scene was actually like, I still baffles me how you even like pulled that off so casually, because the way you act as well, it's like you act as if it's like eating breakfast, like smashing the
glass plate.
Off.
I can tell you why, and it's because when you're watching it, you have a sense of dread that like, how bad is this going to get? When Jay and I were doing it, do you want to know what we really thought was going to happen? We thought I was going to break that glass, take the map, and we were just going to walk out. Like that was our plan. We didn't think that somebody was going to come grab me and that security was going to chase us and that it was going to be an insane, like we didn't think we were opening Pandora's box. And so we seem so casual and relaxed because we're thinking, well, you know, maybe the people around us are going to be shocked that we smashed this museum piece. But other than that, like, what's the worst that's going to happen? We had no idea that it was going to turn into the melee that preceded it. We had no idea.
And I'm guessing like the bit where you run to the subway, was that kind of cut to the point, like a different scene, or was that like just the actual?
Was that in real time? No, that was 100% Jay's idea. He needs to get all the credit for it because the original episode never had us going to the subway like that. Well, I mean, eventually we wound up there, but when the celebration after we'd shot that scene of stealing that map was the biggest celebration I've ever seen in terms of like getting work done. It was crazy. The guy who built the plinth, Adam Belanger, our art director, was like, his heart was in his mouth. Like we were all hugging. It was crazy. We couldn't believe we'd pulled it off. It was crazy. And then we watched the footage and we were like, yeah, this is amazing. And then Jay was like, it's too good. It's got to keep going. We've got to keep going. And so then like 3 months later, we went back and shot all that stuff of us running in the same shot and getting into the subway and then jumping into the subway and running in. And we ran so hard in that take that Jay threw up all over Tim Hortons bathroom because we were running way too fast for our current levels of fitness. Way too fast.
Yeah, I mean, it seems genuine as far as I'm aware.
Well, we wanted to run fast. We really wanted to do it, you know? Because when we actually did run away from those security guards, we were fucking hoofing it. Like we were moving. We were so scared. It was like, holy shit, we just robbed this place. We got to get out of here now. And then everybody's chasing us and we're like, oh, Jesus. Yeah, we were running like crazy.
Do you get like an adrenaline rush, which kind of like a lot of people get adrenaline rushes and like they can't stop? Are you kind of that kind of person? No, I hate it. And I every single time we have to go do something like that, I am living in constant fear for 2 or 3 days beforehand. And I'm like, thinking of everything I can to get out of it. I just don't want to do it. And then of course, when you do it, it's totally painless, painless. Yeah. In fact, if I could just be shooting, I know it's impossible, but if there were like 14,000 Nirvana the band plots and my job was just to go through each one day after day and just do it, I could do it no problem. Like, I bet you Jay would say the same thing, because when we're shooting, it is kind of effortless. It's kind of, there's something so fun about it. And you're just trying to, it's weird. It's like you're trying to be yourself in the way that you were when you were a kid, and having access to that dimension of your personality openly and being like, I just am this. Like, what are you going to do? Like, that's just how I feel. It's invigorating and also so cathartic. And it's like a kind of, it's therapeutic too. Like it's so freeing. I love doing it. I love doing it. Well, it reminds me a lot of Curb Your Enthusiasm. Like, right. Yeah. Because it's like, half reality in a way, like, and their plots are always the same. You know, every episode of Curb is, you know, Larry meets some new people, he fucks up, he says something stupid, tries to apologize, fucks up more, and you know something insane happens at the end. Like, that's kind of the same like plot throughout every episode, and same with your show. Like,
and his humanity is always on display in a way where it's like, when I watch that show, I'm always feeling like, oh, Larry's kind of right here. And I think that's a show where I like, that is a big influence on us as well. Big time. Seinfeld also is a huge influence on our show, as is the show Frasier. Like, Jay and I grew up watching those shows. We talk about them all the time. But I think that Curb Your Enthusiasm would be 10 times the show that it is if he didn't use actors. I think that if he was shooting that show with real people, it would be like a worldwide phenomenon. Not to say that it isn't now. I mean, like, let's be real. It's like one of the best TV shows ever made. But whenever I watch it, especially recently, the thing where I'm kind of like, well, who cares? Like, it is that it's all actors doing whatever Larry told them to do. I have the same problem with a lot of old Woody Allen films where it's like Woody, you fucking with people. A good example is when the guy's talking about Marshall McLuhan in the line for the movie, and then Woody's like, do you even know what you're talking about? Then he brings Marshall McLuhan in and they lambast the guy. I'm like, okay, yeah, you're very clever, but you wrote all this. So it's not really fair. Yeah, you're so brilliant that you wrote a stupid character who's being pretentious about Marshall McLuhan. Then you called Marshall McLuhan, told him to be there, and then you brought him in to prove your own point. I understand that, like, that was a sort of an avant-garde comedy thing to do when it was shot, but I watch it now and I'm like, this is also lazy. This is so lazy. If the whole point of your comedy or your work is to basically show how brilliant you are, then I don't get a lot out of it.
Like, it would definitely be like, I can't even imagine like how great it would be if that they weren't actors. But do you think Larry could pull that off? Do you think he's...
Sure, of course.
Yeah,
of course he could. Yes, I completely reject this idea that certain people are too famous, like that Sacha Baron Cohen is too famous to shoot his own show. Yeah, I'm sure there are places where he can't shoot it. Like, he's not gonna be able to shoot that show on the streets of Los Angeles or in downtown Manhattan, right? But there are so many people in this world. There are so many people. There's all kinds of places you can go that where you can be shooting with people, and they're not going to recognize you and go like, oh my God, like Larry David is not Brad Pitt.
I mean, as well with that, like, even like the first, let's say they took that idea for the first season of Curb, where nobody knew his face at all, because he just wrote Seinfeld. He was a writer. Nobody really saw his face. That would, I guess, he could probably even shoot in LA then, maybe, because
easily. And he could keep Garland, and he could keep like some of the cast, like the people who were like set, and they could totally shut. But I think the difference there is that Larry David is such a brilliant writer that when he writes something and wants it to connect like A to B to C to D, and then everything wraps up in E, like when he writes that way, I bet it would be very difficult to have that happen in the random flow of reality. Very difficult.
I mean,
we write our episodes as we're shooting them.
I was going to say, like, it would be hard for with your projects to think of a beginning, ending. Like, do you think of a beginning, ending, then try and connect it all together that way? Or do you
normally we think of like a good premise, like something that we think is like cool as a premise, and then we see where it goes. That birthday episode is a great example. We were like, oh, it's 420, we should pretend it's Jay's birthday, and then we should go to the big weed march in Toronto. That's all we had. And so we went out and shot that, and then we sat on the footage for like a year just looking at it, being like, what could happen next? And that's when we came up with the idea of the toonie and like that getting lost, and then Matt going on a shopping spree and missing Jay's birthday. And we sort of built it like that. But then other episodes are like, we know we're going to Sundance, so we'll try to make something around Sundance. Is like these kinds of things. Other ones, we sort of have an idea for what a great ending would be, and then we'll try to shoot towards it. But it's never formulaic. Like there's no, it's not like we ever write something and we're like, yeah, that's it. Let's just go do it. Things always change. Always.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the magic as well with like filmmaking, like, because there's also a thing like when you have an idea in your head, it never comes out as its true form. Like if you write a perfect screenplay, and you're sticking to that while filming, it still never comes out like that.
I actually think that's a horrible way to make films, and I think people who do that are deluded. That the idea that you can write something. So look, maybe there are some people who are so brilliant that they can see exactly the way something's going to be on the page and then on screen, and there it's just a translation. But there's something so dead and cold about that, and that all the best stuff that I've ever seen and I've ever been a part of were things that weren't planned. They've always been things that weren't planned. And the things that we did plan, the jokes that we planned, the bits that we planned always sucked. We always cut them. And so we just stopped planning them, because there is, and this is a testament to how stupid I am as a writer, that's for sure. But you lose the real magic of spontaneity and like what could happen if you think, oh, I'm just going to go shoot my script. In fact, I think it's a failure when you go and you shoot exactly what you had on the page and that's what you got. I would consider that a huge failure.
I guess when you do that, you have limitations. You're more closed to like open ideas. Like if you're filming something and then someone says, "Oh, we can do like this in a different way," and you think, "No, we have to do it this way." It's like
of course, because you're closed off from it.
Yeah.
Well, and you also think that because you've got a prescribed path forward, that will take you to the promised land, and it never does. It never does. Look, things. Every single episode of Nirvana the Band, the show, and every movie I've ever made has been absolutely horrible, like unwatchable garbage, like not fit for an audience to watch 2 minutes of until the final 15% of editing. Every single time, it's like that. It just does not meet the standard that when you watch it, you're like, okay, yes, this is in the voice of the show. This is the show. That only happens in the final 15% of making something in the editing room, and that's because you can't plan it. Like you just can't plan that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm totally a big believer of like not in a way like editing saves the project, but like the fact that editing is such a magical tool that you can almost like transform an idea. Like you can probably make like a straight drama, like the most like depressing film possible, and you can probably turn around in editing process to make it a comedy with just like incredible techniques.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's incredible.
The guy who made Force Majeure, who's like a European guy from Denmark or something like that. I can never pronounce his name, but he made a movie before Force Majeure called Play or Kids. I guess it wouldn't have been Kids. That's the Larry Clark, but it was shot in like very much that, oh my God, how much of this is real? I can't believe I'm watching this. Like that film is unbelievable. That guy's a genius. That Force Majeure guy, that guy's a genius. He's like one of the few people that I see their work and I'm like, how do you do this? How do you do it? You're too good.
There's a lot of people you mentioned who are geniuses, like, and I've never heard of any of them, so I'm obviously missing out on something.
Well, look, I'm also talking about a lot of crazy people who just have a lot of time and are making movies about nonsense. I wouldn't necessarily call them geniuses, but you know what? Who is that jazz player who says the true genius is the person who's most like themselves? And I truly believe that. So in that sense, yes. Larry David is a hardcore genius. Kaveh Zahidi is a hardcore genius. Like these people are unabashedly themselves and they're taking all comers.
Well, talking about geniuses who make like bad stuff. Are you familiar with Neil Breen?
I've heard this name. What's the work called? I've heard this name.
Double Down. That's probably his most famous film. But what's interesting about him is like it's really hard to tell whether he thinks he's a good filmmaker or not, because he acts like so.
Is this a YouTube guy?
No, he actually releases feature films. Like he's released
Oh, wow.
5, 6 feature films. And
Is he kind of like Kaufman? Or is he
No.
just, or does he
Well,
just seem
that-
autistic?
that's the difficult thing. We don't know whether he's
Yeah,
like
right,
Kaufman or, you know,
Or
a really
just
bad
touched?
filmmaker.
Right, exactly.
I mean, I believe that he started off as like a really bad filmmaker, and he gained like self-awareness and kept this character.
It's like what
which
Tommy
is-
Wiseau tried to do.
Yeah, and he failed very badly.
Yeah, yeah.
But he's like definitely what Tommy Wiseau wish he'd become. Because he like with filmmaking, I think in America it's quite it's like you can legally shoot anywhere in the desert or in your own house without any permissions or anything.
Well, you can shoot on the streets without any permission if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably what he doesn't know. But from his thought process with that's his entire films. It's either shot in his own house or shot in the desert, because he has no money. He has no like legal representation.
I see. Somebody was get word to him that he can shoot in the street. What city is he from?
No idea. Probably LA, I think.
Yeah, sure. Just go out in the streets and shoot. You know what? The great thing about filmmaking is that property laws are so powerful in both Canada and the United States that once you shot something, right? So once you yourself have filmed something, the like shooting in public, whatever laws there are to protect that, are often dwarfed and crushed by, well, it's my property. I filmed it. Like I created this, so I own it. So there's a great tension going on between those two things where property laws are almost always coming out ahead. Always. So that's what saved us in making Operation Avalanche. Saved us because we went there and shot like in NASA. Like literally, like we're shooting in NASA with like all NASA people, like everybody was like, we were there for like the shooting. We shot at the old Mission Control. Like we shot where they actually controlled the lunar lander. And the only reason we could use that footage was because of private property rights, because we had shot the footage, and far be it from them to say that they owned that footage, because it was ours.
I was gonna say with that as well. Like, what was your like how did you represent yourself in NASA?
As film student? Well, it was a honest representation, because at the time I was a film student at York University in Toronto.
Right. Yeah.
And so we went down as a team of students making a documentary about the moon landing. So our cover in the movie was exactly the same as our cover in real life. Like we pretended to be a film crew in both realities.
I mean, I guess that would help with like
big time.
If like someone caught you, you can just like keep going, and it will be part of the film.
Oftentimes that like finding resonance between reality and what you're shooting is worth its weight in gold. It's crazy, because then, as you just said, anything you shoot is usable. And so if your cover is your film crew pretending to be a film crew so you can actually spy and figure out what's going on with the moon landing, and in real life you are pretending to be a film crew from a university so you can see what's going on with the moon landing, like those things are so approximate that anything you would say is real, and it takes a lot of the pressure off your ability to improvise or act, because what's happening on screen is so close to what's happening off screen. And that's why it's like with Jay and I acting together, or with Owen and I acting together, like we're trying to play out the themes within our own relationships so that we don't need to come up with stuff, right? We don't need to make stuff up. It's very, very, very useful.
And what was NASA's reaction to the film?
Originally, the people that we had shot with, I think, were pretty stoked. But then Wired wrote a big article about it, and NASA was not happy.
All right.
NASA was pissed. NASA was like, "Fuck these guys, and fuck all of Canada." But it was kind of all in good fun.
Yeah.
Because again, we don't really think that the moon landing was faked by a bunch of CIA agents, and don't think that we think that. So like they knew that it was all for this fictional movie. So like how mad could anybody really be? Because it truly is victimless. It's like all of the things that we do. I suppose you could say that people had their time wasted, but then not really. I think everybody had a very good time. Like the vibe was quite good down there.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like, I mean, you just said like you don't believe the moon landings were faked, but do you think Kubrick had any kind of? Do you think Kubrick was involved in any way at all? Do you think he was even approached? No. Not even
no. And I'll tell you how I know this. I spent so much of my life researching this topic and going to all of these places. Like when I was in London, it was to shoot Operation Avalanche, where I went to those old studios. Like I went to the studios where they shot 2001, and I spent so much time at NASA. And not only is it crazy impossible that they would have even thought about like staging the broadcast, but it's technically impossible for the short story is because you could never do slow motion video to give that like fake gravity looking thing. You could never ever do that for the length of the broadcast that it was. I think the original broadcast was like uncut 2.5 hours long. To do slow, like you would need a magnetic drive like the size of a planet to store that much slow motion video in the 1960s. It just did not exist. And two, NASA originally, when they were doing this mission, like they weren't even talking about televising it or like that. Like what they were trying to do is just get to the moon, right? They were in a race against the Russians, and all of this stuff of like turning it into a propaganda war came on much later, and it just here's what I found. It's a much more convenient story, and it's a lot more interesting that a bunch of filmmakers got together, including Stanley Kubrick, and faked it. That's just so much more interesting than definitely. 3,000 nerds programmed a rocket to land on the moon and get home, and nothing went wrong, right? Which is the boring story. Look, there's a reason they made Apollo 13 and not Apollo 11, right? There's a reason for that. They've never made a movie. There was that they just made the one by the Whiplash guy just made. It was brutal. It was so bad. And because there's no story, there's no conflict. Everything goes right. Like there's nothing. It has no story elements. And so that's why when people think about the moon landing, which was such a mythical, amazing, major event, they try to put it within the box of really, really good story. And really good story is, it's not what you think. It was faked. And if you're smart, you'll know that that's the truth. Like that's the story that everybody wants to hear. Everybody wants that story.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, any conspiracy theory any ridiculous conspiracy theory can be seen as a great idea for a film anyway.
They all are. They are films. They are films. A conspiracy theory by its nature is only powerful because it's a good story.
I mean,
right?
You might be familiar with it's actually to do with Canada actually, like this, the conspiracy theory that the Queen and Prince Philip went on a trip to Canada and took a load of school children to a family picnic.
Right.
And morphed into lizards and ate them.
Badass.
Do you not know that one?
No, that one hasn't been in the Globe and Mail yet.
It's my most favorite conspiracy theory, just because it's so ridiculous.
Why the picnic element of it? I guess because the kids didn't know that they were going to be eaten.
That's the weird thing as well. Like, why would the Queen and Prince Philip just take these kids on a picnic? And like the person who, I think he was like originally found like on Reddit something or some kind of forum, like some guy saying like I was one of the children who escaped.
Oh, he witnessed the slaughter.
Yeah,
He's
which
like the
is-
guy from Fire in the
But-
Sky who was abducted by aliens but somehow made it out.
But anyone could have wrote that. I could have wrote that, you know, and it could just been a great work of fiction.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The Queen. I don't think there's a lizard hiding under there.
But I love that stuff, though. That's amazing.
Me too. In fact, it's in many ways the inspiration for that that movie about H.P. Lovecraft in Canada.
Yeah. Because it was a yeah. Sorry. So I want to actually finish off with a question. I noticed you give a lot like advice to young filmmakers, but like if you could see a version of yourself when you were 18 or just getting into filmmaking, what would you say to yourself? What would you kind of, with all your experience now, what would you say to that younger version?
Yeah, I don't. It's hard to give that advice to myself because I look back on my life as being like relatively like I am myself because of the random shit that happened to me at 18. And so if I were to go to myself at 18 and say anything, like what that's going to create somebody who's different. And I would hate that. But what I say to other young people is, well, man, like, I mean, like there's like 5,000 things that you could say about trying to be a young filmmaker. What I would say about trying to be just a young person in general, whether you not you want to be a filmmaker, an artist, or a bank manager or whatever, is this: don't let the memories of your own life be enemies to you. Like, do not let the things that have happened to you in your life or anything in your past, those things should be a gold mine. That should be a gold mine of meaning. And everything that's ever occurred to you, good and bad, like that should work for you. That's the reason human beings have memory. It's not so that you can remember somebody's phone number. It's so that you can take all of the occurrences of your life and turn that into a kind of story that propels you forward. And if you're viewing your life as basically tragedy to tragedy, and you have a negative association, like you tense up when you're thinking of the things that have happened in your past, then look, I'm very sorry, and that's quite tragic, but you're missing out on basically being able to turn whatever that tragedy was into ammunition for what you're going to do now. Because if you lose touch with the things that you thought were interesting when you were 6, or if you say, I don't even have a memory before I was 10, or if you say, I don't like to think about my teenage years, then that's fine. But you are leaving so much money on the table. You're leaving so much money on the table in terms of living a full and complete life, because those things are you. And you can deny them and run from them, but your subconscious mind will never let you escape. Like they are going to chase you until the day you are dead. So you should learn to live with them and use them, right? Use them in your storytelling. Tell other people about these memories. I'm not trying to say diminish them so that, you being attacked by, like some type of like paramilitary group and they chopped your leg off is now like a hilarious moment. But there is a way to reorganize your past so that it has actually created you, and you can be proud of yourself, whoever you are, wherever you are. You can take pride in who you are based on the fact that you either made it through this adversity and you're still here to talk about it, or you took all of these things and you're using them to create your personality now. Because otherwise, they're basically going to be a ball and chain as opposed to like rocket fuel. And I say this to young filmmakers all the time, but the older I get, the more I realize it applies to everybody. That some people are just haunted, and they're haunted by the things that they haven't done, or an unfulfilled present, or negative memories of betrayals, or things that happened to them, or missed opportunities, or whatever. And that you need to basically make peace with those ghosts so that you can become something now that is positive. And that doesn't mean, again, write them all off, but it means analyze them, think about them. Like, what did they mean and how did they make you now? Because there's power in that. And that's certainly how I've felt about, like, anything that you watch of mine is basically me wrestling with those same things of my past.
It's very interesting to say that, actually, because it made me think of a quote by Anthony Bourdain. Do you know him quite well?
Love him. Oh, my, I love him, but Jay McCarrol really loves him.
Oh, really? Yeah, it made me think of a quote.
Huge. He watched all of it.
Yeah, it's amazing. It made me think of a quote where he's talking about, like, I think he's comparing it to, like, a metaphor of, like, walking down a dark alleyway where he knows something bad's going to happen. You know, he's going to get mugged or something terrible is going to happen. But he still does it because he knows that there's going to be a story that comes out of it in the end. It could be a bad story, it could be a good story, but, you know, it's something he'll learn from. It's something, like you said, with bad memories, like that could develop into a bad memory, but you learn from that memory. You kind of, and that story could be an interesting part for, like, a film, or, you know, it just gives your brain more information. It's one of my favorite quotes from him.
Well, Bourdain's, this quote is more about like risk taking in the present, in a sense, which I agree with. I agree with that quote. But yeah, Bourdain is a much bigger risk taker than I am. That's for sure. I'm a much more like conservatively, like, I'm afraid of most new experiences. But I love Bourdain. To connect both of these things together, Steve Jobs has a quote where he says, looking at your life forwards, it's impossible to see how doing one thing will lead to something else, and everything kind of seems like a waste of time. And it's very difficult to make decisions when you're thinking of an end goal. Case in point, you know, you want to be a filmmaker, so you're like, okay, should I go to film school or go travel the world, right? Like, what do I do? It's almost impossible to figure this out. But looking backwards on your life and looking at the things that you have done, it's very easy to draw lines between the different things that you've done and how they've led you directly to this moment. So focusing too much on how to get exactly to the end goal, I think, can give you paralysis. Whereas really what you want to do is live your life and live it honestly and openly, and be honest with people and be yourself. And then looking back on it, you will be able to see how it was that you got to where you were. Hopefully that place is not dead, like in Bourdain's case, or in jail, right? Like you don't want to be in those places.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny taking a Bourdain quote as to how to approach life. That's complicated, but who knows? I bet you there's a conspiracy there. Weinstein whacked him.
Yeah, perhaps.
Somebody got to him.
I love him, so I like to believe that you know, he wasn't involved in that shit, or, you know. But
Bourdain, I don't know enough about him. Again, Jay's the real fan, but everything I've seen of him, I love. I love that episode where he visits Ramsay's restaurant before Ramsay's Ramsay. Oh my God. Oh, so good. In London.
Yeah.
It's so amazing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, he's a big influence on me on kind of, like, just, even though I struggle with a lot, kind of risk taking, he kind of makes me think you should do it. You should just fucking do it.
I couldn't agree more. Look, especially with the low risk kind of stuff. I say that, I'm sure maybe it's a high social risk, but the low risk stuff of just going out, talking to people, starting a podcast, doing these types of things. No way. Like, yeah, definitely do it, because you will regret not doing it. You'll never regret, saying something stupid or doing something stupid more than you will regret just having done nothing.
Yeah, Wood's great, man. I'll say. Cool.
Hey, it was really great talking to you.
Yeah, man. You too.
Next time I'm in Brighton, we're going for fish and chips, and you're going to take me to the hot spot. I want to go to a place with tons and tons of tartar sauce. So much where they're like looking at me like, really? You want this much? What are you talking? Really?
Is it?
And I'm going to be like, yes. And tons of ketchup.
Is that the sauce in Canada? Tartar sauce.
Tartar sauce. Is it relish and mayonnaise, my friend? Relish and mayonnaise. One of the greatest.
You do your thing. I'm sure it would be appreciated.